Welcome to Translation Compass, the localization podcast. This podcast is presented by Leginda, the online translation agency. And today, we're doing a deep dive into what makes a great translator.
Ooh, interesting.
Because I think a lot of people think, oh, you just, you speak two languages, so you can translate.
Right. You're bilingual. That's
Yeah, you're bilingual, that's it.
easy peasy.
But there's so much more to it,
Oh, so much more.
wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like seeing the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
You just see that they can speak two languages, but underneath there's a whole world of knowledge and experience and expertise.
Totally. So let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, first of all, I guess we should talk about like the baseline, which is experience and qualifications.
Right.
Because, I mean, obviously to be a professional translator, you do need some sort of, background in education.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't just hire someone to build a house who, just watched a couple YouTube videos, would you?
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, in the same way, you would want to make sure that your translator has some, actual education, some degrees or certifications, diplomas, something that shows that they have, put in the work and the time and have the knowledge and the skills to actually do the job.
Right, so that's the baseline. But then, on top of that, I've heard that, great translators are really curious people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, what does that look like and how does that play into their work?
I mean, imagine, right, you're translating a book, right?
Yeah.
And there's all these cultural references or maybe even some technical jargon.
Right.
A great translator isn't just going to translate the words. They're going to dig deeper.
Yeah.
They're going to research, the cultural context, the historical background, the technical details.
That makes sense.
They want to make sure they understand, not just what the words say, but what they really mean.
So it's really like being a detective almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's this thing called the native language principle, which I'd always find so interesting.
Right.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so basically it means that professional translators usually only translate into their native language
Okay.
because, even if you are fluent in another language, there's always that extra level of nuance and understanding that you have with your own mother tongue.
Right.
It's like, if you're writing with your dominant hand,
Yeah.
it just flows more naturally, right?
Uh,
And so with the translation, you want to capture that same kind of natural flow and feeling.
So even if someone can speak multiple languages fluently, they usually specialize in translating into just one.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also this related concept called the target country principle,
Oh, interesting.
which is, ideally the translator should also be living in the target country
Got it.
or at least have really strong ties to the culture
Okay.
because, language is constantly evolving. There's new slang, there's new trends. And so you want to make sure that your translator is really up to date on all of that.
So it's not just about language, it's about culture as well.
Exactly.
So, okay, we've talked about qualifications, we've talked about curiosity, we've talked about the native language principle.
Yep.
But let's talk about specialization.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of translators specialize in certain fields.
Right. Absolutely.
So how does that play into the whole translation process?
Well, I mean, imagine you're translating like a medical document or a legal contract or even something like a marketing brochure.
Right.
You need more than just language skills. You need to understand the specific terminology.
Yeah.
You need to understand the legal context, the scientific principles, the marketing strategies.
Oh, wow.
So, it's not uncommon to find translators who have backgrounds in other fields.
Okay.
They might have been doctors or lawyers or engineers.
Right.
And they bring that expertise into their translation work.
So it's like a whole other level of knowledge on top of the language skills.
Exactly.
And speaking of other things, we can't forget about technology.
Right.
Because technology plays a huge role in the world of translation these days, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, we have all these amazing computer-assisted translation tools, right?
Right.
Like, SDL Trados or MemoQ.
Okay.
And these tools, they don't replace human translators, but they really enhance their capabilities.
Okay.
They help build terminology databases. They ensure consistency across large projects. They can even automate some of the more repetitive tasks.
Right. So it's like having a superpowered assistant.
Exactly, yeah. But I think it's important to note that AI-assisted translation, it's still in its early stages.
Right.
While it can be helpful for certain types of content, it still lacks that nuance and that cultural understanding that a human translator can bring.
Right. So it's not a replacement for human translators. It's more like a supplement.
Exactly, yeah.
And this actually brings us to another important point, which is lifelong learning.
Right.
Because I imagine that, the world of translation is constantly evolving.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So why is lifelong learning so important for translators?
Well, languages are constantly changing. New words are being invented. New slang is emerging.
Yeah,
And then, like we talked about, technology is always evolving. New feat tools, new software, new AI advancements.
right.
So a great translator is always going to be learning, attending workshops, reading industry publications, experimenting with new tools.
Right.
They're never going to be complacent. They're always going to be striving to improve their skills.
There's a very dynamic and demanding field, it sounds like.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And speaking of demanding, let's talk about reliability.
Okay.
Because obviously when you're working with a translator, you want someone who's reliable, who's going to meet deadlines, who's going to communicate clearly.
Right. Absolutely.
So why are those qualities so important, especially for clients?
Well, imagine you're a business and you're launching a new product in a foreign market.
Right.
You need your marketing materials translated, your website, your packaging, everything.
Right.
And you need it all done accurately, and you need it done on time.
Yeah.
So a reliable translator is going to be someone who understands the importance of those deadlines, who's going to communicate clearly with you throughout the process, who's going to be proactive, who's going to keep you informed of any issues or delays.
So it's really about being a partner, not just a service provider.
Exactly.
And finally, let's talk about pricing.
Okay.
Because obviously pricing is always a factor when you're hiring any kind of service.
Right.
So how does a great translator approach the whole pricing aspect of their work?
Well, good translators understand their value.
Right.
They know that they're providing a specialized service that requires a lot of skill and expertise.
Yeah.
So they're going to set fair prices that reflect that. But they're also going to be transparent about their pricing.
Right.
They're going to be upfront with their clients about their rates, about any additional fees, about their payment terms.
Right. So it's about clear communication and being upfront about everything.
Exactly.
So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
I think it's clear that being a great translator is so much more than just being bilingual.
Yeah.
It's about being curious. It's
Well,
about being skilled. It's about being tech savvy. It's about being reliable.
it's about being a lifelong learner.
It's about being a lifelong learner. Exactly.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought for you, our listeners.
Okay.
As our world becomes increasingly interconnected, and as technology continues to evolve at such a rapid pace, how do you think the role of the translator will change in the future? That's something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of translation. This has been Translation Compass, the localization podcast, presented by Leginda, the online translation agency.